Have you ever felt there's something inside you can't explain? A sudden impulse, anger without reason, sadness that comes out of nowhere. You try to ignore it. You try to move on. But something always returns. Like a hidden presence, an echo in your chest. Carl Jung called this the shadow. But it's not a poetic metaphor. It's real. It's the part of you that you tried to hide, out of fear, shame, or rejection. Everything you repressed, everything you denied, everything you refused to accept about yourself. It's still there, watching, waiting, growing. And the most dangerous part? It's not the existence of the shadow. It's the fact that you refuse to see it. Because everything you deny ends up controlling you. Society teaches, be positive, smile, stay balanced. But the truth is, you were programmed to reject half of who you are, and as long as you ignore that half, it keeps pulling you with invisible chains. From the beginning, we were taught not to trust ourselves. As a child, you were praised when you obeyed, and punished when you dared. At school, you learned that thinking differently meant being wrong. In society, you were trained to follow, never to question. That programming wasn't accidental, it shaped your identity. You weren't born afraid to express yourself. You were conditioned to believe that if you showed your true self, you'd A, be punished, excluded, rejected. So, you started building masks, masks of kindness, competence, control, masks to please others, while suffocating your truth. You began to live not as who you are, but as who they expect you to be. But the truth you hide doesn't vanish. It becomes shadow. And the more you deny it, the more it finds ways to manifest. It explodes in anger. It turns into guilt. It sabotages your relationships. It infects your decisions. You were trained to fear negative emotions. But who decided they're negative? Anger, fear, sadness, they're signals. Messages from your unconscious saying, hey, you're not being yourself. But you didn't learn to listen. You learned to silence. And the system loves that, because the less you know yourself, the easier you are to control. The more you ignore your pain, the more you chase promises of happiness. The more you consume, the more you distract yourself, the more you lose touch with who you are. You believe you need to improve, adjust, perfect yourself. But what if that very belief is the real problem? What if the prison is the idea that you must become better before you deserve love, peace, freedom? That's the deepest lie. The idea that you must be fixed. You don't need fixing. You need reconnection with who you were before. The world told you who to be, and to do that you have to step into the shadow. Revisit what you believe. Question what you were taught. Unlearn. You were programmed to obey. Now it's time to relearn how to think. You were conditioned to run from pain. Now it's time to use it as a compass. The shadow isn't a flaw, it's a part, and integrating it means reclaiming what was stolen. Your authenticity. The lies you believed became the mental cage you live in today. But the secret is, the key has always been in your hands. You just need to remember who you are. Traditional psychology taught us to seek balance. But balance without truth is just a performance. You can appear calm on the outside and be at war on the inside. The personal shadow is the battlefield where this war unfolds. It's not an external enemy, it lives within you. And the most dangerous part? It adapts to your personality. If you're someone who's too proper, your shadow will be rebellious, rule-breaking, maybe even dark. If you avoid conflict, your shadow will be aggressive, violent, ready to explode. It's everything you don't want to be, but are. Everything you swear you don't feel, but do. Everything you judge in others, because you haven't yet faced it in yourself. That's the most twisted mechanism, projection. You can't stand to see in others what you still deny in yourself. So you criticize, accuse, cancel. But deep down, you're trying to silence your own pain, and the more you deny, the stronger the shadow becomes. It starts to act through you, makes you push away those who love you, makes you act like your worst nightmare, and then it drowns you in shame. Shame is the armor of the wounded ego. It whispers, "Stay quiet, pretend. No one can know who you really are." But here's the truth. The shadow only controls you because you fear it, and that fear is learned. You were taught to be ashamed of your anger, your envy, your desire, as if all of that meant you were broken. But it doesn't. It means you're human. You feel anger because you were hurt. You feel envy because you forgot your own worth. You feel desire because there's life inside you waiting to be lived. Shadow psychology is not about glorifying the dark side. It's about integration, naming what was hidden, giving voice to what was silenced. Because only when you name the shadow, it loses its grip. But that takes presence, awareness, and a kind of courage most people are terrified to summon. That's why awakening is uncomfortable, because it destroys the idealized version of who you thought you were. But within that chaos, freedom begins. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be whole. Awakening doesn't begin with light. It begins with discomfort, with the sense that something is wrong, but you can't name it, with the unease of living a life that doesn't feel like yours, with the strange realization that you're surrounded by voices, but none of them are your own. That's when silence starts to scream. That's when the old pleasures lose their taste. That's when the answers that once worked now feel hollow. This is the collapse of programming. The conditioned mind begins to break, and it's terrifying, because without the lies, what remains? You start to see. And what you see is not pretty. You see your masks. You see your patterns. You see the prison you built with your own hands. But in that exact moment, the first spark of freedom appears, because awareness is the first act of rebellion. Rebellion isn't shouting at the world. It's whispering at your ego. It's looking your shadow in the eye and saying, "You no longer rule me." Awakening hurts, because every part of you that you believed was real begins to fall apart. The inherited opinions, the family beliefs, the ideas planted by religion, culture, education, everything you once called me begins to dissolve. But you're still there, not the character, but the presence. And that presence watches, feels, chooses. It is the only part that cannot be programmed. It is your untouchable core. It is who you were, before any conditioning. True awakening is not beautiful. It is raw. It is lonely. It is necessary. You begin to say no. No to relationships that drain you. No to goals that aren't yours. No to the comfort that keeps you in chains. And with every no, a hidden yes begins to emerge. Yes to truth, to soul, to integrity. That is the true rebellion. Not against the outer system, but against the inner one you've been carrying unknowingly. The war was never out there. It was always within. How many times have you made decisions that felt wrong, but you did them anyway? How many times have you sabotaged a relationship, a project, a dream? You may have blamed luck, impulse, or fate, but it wasn't any of those. It was your shadow taking over. And the most tragic part? The more you try to be good, the more power you give to what you ignore. Because a rejected shadow doesn't vanish. It waits, and it feeds on your repression. That's why the most controlling people often hide the darkest impulses. The most religious bury guilt they'd never confess. The calmest explode when you least expect it. You can't be free if you don't know who you are, and you can't know who you are if you keep rejecting half your soul. Carl Jung didn't say to fight the shadow. He said to integrate it, to look in the mirror and say, yes, that's me too. But that takes courage, because when you look inward, you see what you fear most. And in that moment, you have two choices: close your eyes and stay a slave, or face it, and begin to become whole. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the map to your true freedom, but first you have to stop running, you have to see. After the fall comes the void, a silent space where nothing seems to make sense. You're no longer who you were, but you don't yet know who you are. This is the most dangerous and the most sacred point, because here, everything false is gone, and everything true has yet to be born. This is where you rebuild yourself, not in haste, not with masks, but with mental codes rooted in freedom. Mental codes are invisible agreements that shape your decisions. Most were implanted without your awareness. I must please to be loved. I can't fail. I have to play it safe. These codes are chains, but once you awaken, you begin to write new ones. You realize you can choose your own narrative, that you can be kind without erasing yourself, strong without being rigid, free without being selfish. This reconstruction doesn't happen externally. It doesn't depend on money, status, or validation. It is an internal act of sovereignty. You stop asking for permission. You begin consulting something deeper, something that's always been there, but you feared it. Intuition, soul, that quiet voice saying, "This is your path." To rebuild is an act of radical courage, because there's no map. You must become the cartographer of your own existence, and this path demands new codes. Code 1. Nothing outside me defines who I am. Code 2. I honor my shadow. It shows me where it hurts. Code 3. Every pain brings a key. I choose to use it. Code 4. I refuse to be ruled by fear. Code 5. My truth matters more than comfort. These are not pretty quotes. They're decisions, anchors, shields against the old self trying to return. You don't need to heal everything to move forward. You just need to commit to what's real. And what's real is imperfect, but it is whole. The freedom you seek is not at the end of the journey. It's in every choice you make now. Every time you say yes to what's true, you move closer to yourself, and the closer you get to yourself, the less manipulable you become, the less fearful, the less programmed by external voices. You will no longer be a character. You'll be presence, and that presence has power. Power to create, to break, to rebuild, to exist fully. Reconstruction isn't about becoming who you used to be. It's about becoming who you always were, but were conditioned to forget. Now you know, the shadow isn't the enemy. It's the reflection of what you've refused to face for far too long. But knowing is not the same as transforming. Most people stop here. They understand, but don't change. They see, but go back to sleep. Because awakening demands sacrifice. The sacrifice of illusion, illusion of control, illusion of safety, illusion of identity. You must let the character die, so the true self can emerge. And it hurts. It hurts to step out of victimhood. It hurts to stop blaming the world. It hurts to take responsibility for your soul, but that pain is sacred. It burns away what's false and reveals what's always been there, waiting to be remembered. You are not the name you carry, not the title you earned, not the story you've repeated out of fear of change. You are presence. You are possibility. You are the space where consciousness can choose something new. But choosing truth has a cost. You will lose everything that was a lie. Relationships, beliefs, roles. And then you'll have to answer. Do you prefer the peace of your prison, or the liberating chaos of truth? That's the choice that shapes destinies. Because in the end, there are no gurus, no ready answers. There's only you, face to face with the mirror. And in that mirror, the shadow will still be there. Not as a threat, but as a reminder that light only matters when it includes the darkness. You don't need to defeat the shadow. You need to know it, give it a name, look it in the eye, and not look away. Because when you do that, it stops owning you and starts walking beside you. And then, For the first time, you become whole, not motivated, not perfect, whole. And maybe that's the only truth worth living.